Welcome to Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast, brought to you by Nickel Investigations, the podcast that delves deep into the unsolved mysteries that haunt our province. I'm Jay Nickel, a private investigator with Nickel Investigations, and your host and guide in this journey through the chilling tales that left investigators baffled and communities in search of answers. In each episode, we'll unearth the forgotten stories of Ontario's cold cases, exploring the details, the evidence, and the individuals involved with the eye of a private investigator who specializes in cold case investigations. From the mysterious disappearances to the perplexing murders, our mission is to shine a light in these cases and hopefully bring justice to those who have long awaited closure. But we can't do it alone. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of these enigmatic cases. We'll speak with experts, law enforcement officials, and sometimes even the families of the victims, all in the pursuit of truth. So buckle up and prepare to dive headfirst into the world of unresolved mysteries. Together we'll keep the flame of hope burning for justice, one episode at a time. Thank you for tuning in to the Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast. Let's begin our quest for answers. This episode is brought to you by Nickel Investigations. This is about three individuals who disappeared from Richmond Hill, Ontario, a town about 30 minutes north of downtown Toronto, within a 20-year period. Up first in chronological order is Wendy Renee Smith. Carissa Smith still longs for her mother's call on her birthday, just like she received her whole life up until 1994, the year before Wendy Renee Smith vanished forever. Police are doubtful that will ever happen considering the circumstances of Wendy's disappearance, which investigators believe coincided with her death. It was on April 13, 1995, that Wendy went to her first ever shift at Richmond Hill's Fantasia Hotel, a seedy strip club formerly located at 10,097 Yonge Street in Richmond Hill, about 30 minutes north of downtown Toronto. Her family included her now deceased father and mother, Roy and Olive Smith, her four siblings, two ex-husbands, and the four daughters. Wendy had lost custody of her four daughters due to excessive drug use and a lifestyle not befitting children. Now nearly 30 years following her last sighting, her family have reconnected and have begun to ask questions. Wendy was born in 1962 and grew up in the novel and tiny village of Burwash, about 40 minutes south of Sudbury, made up of about 1,000 staff and their families from the local prison. By 18, Wendy was pregnant and married to her high school sweetheart, Aaron Laughlin. They were very young. They had a small ceremony. My mother even made Wendy's dress and Wendy's sister Betty. On September 16, 1980, Wendy had her first daughter, Crystal. Just before Wendy's mother, Olive, passed away months after being diagnosed with lung cancer in 1984, Wendy's marriage had fallen apart. Wendy moved to Sault Ste. Marie to be around her older sister Alice as a means of reproducing the strong role model her mother played in her life. It was while living there with her first daughter that she met her second husband, Frank Racchetta. Together they'd have a daughter named Carissa Smith in 1985. At some point, Wendy began using drugs, including a number of addictive street narcotics, like methamphetamine and crack cocaine, according to members of her family. In 1988, she and Frank's relationship broke apart and he moved back to Sault Ste. Marie. Following Frank's departure, Wendy's life began to spiral further downwards. At one point, Wendy, who was involved in more than one abusive relationship in her adult life, was beaten. Betty said she was called to a Brampton hospital where she discovered Wendy in a hospital bed, her face badly beaten. It was during this visit that Betty first discovered Wendy was working as an escort. It's unclear if Wendy had a pimp at this stage, but it's alleged that she'd eventually worked with one. In 1991, she had her third daughter, named Cheryl Smith. 6 months later, Wendy approached a 20-year-old woman running a youth group at Queensway Cathedral in Mississauga and asked if she could take care of her daughter while she served jail time. A few years after Cherise was born, Wendy was pregnant with a fourth daughter she would name Danielle. Up next, the disappearance. On April 13th, 1995, at 10 p.m., Wendy Smith, aged 33, of Toronto, started working as an exotic dancer at the Fantasia nightclub, formerly located at 10,097 Yonge Street in Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto. Wendy was supposed to return to her residence after finishing work the following morning at 3 a.m., but never arrived. On April 16th, 1995, Wendy Smith was reported missing by a roommate. Wendy was last seen at her place of business wearing a black skirt, a black sweater, and black shoes. Wendy Smith was described as 5'3" and 122 pounds, with brown hair and green eyes, with an earring in her left nostril. The investigation. It was on April 13th, 1995, that police say the elderly and caring man who'd taken Wendy in told investigators he dropped her off at Fantasia for her first day of work. Police said alternate means were made for Wendy to get home, involving her being given some cash. Detective Bill Curtis from York Regional Police's Cold Case Unit would not divulge any further information on this. On April 16th, York Regional Police received a missing person report 3 days later from the gentleman who dropped her off, who has since passed. There is no record of her arriving at the club from the police's follow-up interviews with staff, he added. This is a very important point. During the investigation, there were a number of suspects, two of which police were unable to clear through alibi or polygraph test, though no names or even hints at these individuals were ever released. All the fathers of Wendy's children were interviewed. Fantasia was not only a strip joint, but also a place where prostitution was conducted, according to police. There have been dozens of tips and some 5 supposed sightings since Wendy went missing, but those haven't resulted in much to further the investigation. Up next, the suspects. First suspect is Robert Pickton, a serial killer from BC. Now, York Regional Police are looking into the possibility that an exotic dancer named Wendy Smith, who went missing from the Richmond Hill area, may have ended up at the BC pig farm of serial killer Robert Pickton, where dozens of missing prostitutes were allegedly murdered. Although more than 25 women have been identified from DNA samples taken from the farm, some samples remain unidentified, and police, for reasons they refuse to make public, believe Smith could be one of them. Bikers are another possibility. They frequent Fantasia and would have easy access to dispose of a body. Wendy did have a drug problem. Did she possibly get into owing the wrong people money? It's possible, but rather than murder someone, they seem more likely to simply want their money and have means to collect. The man who supposedly dropped her off seems to be the most likely suspect. Staff and other workers at Fantasia do not remember Wendy ever being in the club that night. Was she even dropped off in the driveway of the club, or is that just a story? Who was this individual? I do have some information. He was rather well known. Could he have murdered Wendy prior to when he said he dropped her off at the club? Could she have possibly overdosed? ODing is a possibility, but seems more likely this man would have called 911 for assistance, or at least the police if he found Wendy dead. So this does lean to a murder. As of today, Wendy Smith still has not been found and considered an open case. Up next, Pierre Mercon. This episode is brought to you by Nickel Investigations. This is about Pierre Mercon. He was in her 50s without any training, experience, or prior inclination that Norma Mercon began painting. Unable to sleep since her son Pierre went missing in the 90s, she picked up a paintbrush one night and showed an amazing flair for recreating the classics, Picasso, Botticelli, and Group of Seven painter Lauren Harris. The immense grief remains despite her best efforts to banish the agony that descended upon her family that fateful night. Needing to explain what happened to their 21-year-old son, Norma and her husband Jorge now believe Pierre was abducted, something the pair say all but ruined their lives. It's a mystery, but it's not a mystery. We know someone did something very bad to him, said Jorge. It remains a mystery only because we don't have any closure. Halloween. Pierre Mercon was last seen in the early morning hours of November 1st, 1996 at approximately 2 a.m. He had attended a Halloween party which had taken place at the Original Six Sports Bar located at 14 Oxford Street in Richmond Hill, just 30 minutes north of downtown Toronto. Mercon was born on February 27, 1975, and is described as a white male, approximately 181 centimeters, 5'11" in height, and 100 kilograms, 220 pounds in weight, with hazel eyes and brown hair. Mr. Mercon has a prominent tattoo of Uruguay on his right shoulder. At the time he was last seen, he was wearing army fatigues, work boots, an army-style rain poncho and green wool hat, and a long black wig. Foul play is strongly suspected in his disappearance. No criminal record, no brushes with the law, no hanging with the round crowd, no reason to disappear. Up next, the disappearance. According to the Toronto Sun, there were upward of 200 patrons at the now-defunct bar celebrating that night. The bar rested on an open patch of land that was almost a pasture back then. It is now filled with residential housing. Mercon phoned his mother from the payphone outside the bar and asked her to pick him up at a nearby corner. She had driven him there earlier in the evening so he could celebrate with colleagues who had just finished a federal job training program. He and his mother were close, and she didn't mind his calling for a lift. Mercon's mother drove to the prearranged street corner to pick up her son. She found it empty. In fact, no one was in sight. When Norma Mercon last saw her son, he was wearing a costume consisting of army fatigues, brown work boots, a camouflage army-style rain poncho that his brother Alexander had loaned him, a green wool hat, and a long black hippie-style wig. Only his poncho has ever turned up. It was found under the table where Mercon had been sitting. The police response: "He's over 18. He's a grown man. Wait it out." And as a result, it was 3 days before a detective knocked at our door, recalled Norma. The suspects. York police worked to find out what had occurred to Pierre, spending months investigating a man named Dennis LaChance. A police source said undercover investigators performed a lengthy and complex investigation in a bid to have him confess. Although LaChance was arrested in 1997, he was released the same day, officers lacking the evidence to hold him further. Bikers were also known to frequent the Original Six Sports Bar. There is a very good possibility they could be involved. My take on this is there simply does not seem to be any leads at all, though it would be nice to find more information on Dennis LaChance. Today, Norma, an immigrant to Canada from Uruguay in 1969, spent the following years working to bring her son home, printing thousands of missing posters and plastering York Region and downtown Toronto with them. With the help of her dear friend Diana Caggiano, she would also hold annual vigils outside the bar that would close down years later. Pierre's brother Alexander, who has since moved away to Florida, was particularly hard hit by the disappearance, considering he begged Pierre to go out with him that night, mere hours after Alexander had earned his degree from Guelph University. As of today, Pierre Mercon still has not been found and is considered an open case. Up next, Cheryl Rowe. This episode is brought to you by Nickel Investigations. Christina Clark's 45-year-old mother, Cheryl Rowe, vanished a few days before Christmas in 2011 from Richmond Hill, Ontario, a city about 30 minutes north of downtown Toronto. Time of year she wouldn't miss for the world, Christina says. York Region Police say they strongly suspect foul play in her disappearance. Christina and Cheryl had been planning a special holiday dinner for their entire family that Christmas Day, with the plans for guests and food lists stuck to the fridge. But the holiday turned somber for the Rowe family, with presents unopened and dinner ingredients never touched. Christina woke up Christmas morning, the third day her mother Cheryl had been missing, with a sense of doom that had hit her as she sat up in bed. I knew no matter what, if my mother was alive, she would have come home for Christmas morning. I knew something was very wrong right then, Christina says. Cheryl Rowe was last seen with her family on December 22nd, 2011, when she and Christina went to a Walmart in Richmond Hill to buy Christmas presents. Later that night, Christina went to a friend's house and Cheryl was at her brother's family's home. Christina called her mother to ask if she could meet her near her uncle's house with some clothing, because she was planning to spend the night at a friend's house in the area. The meeting place was to be right between both locations. They spoke briefly on the phone, Christina says, and her mother said she would see her in a few minutes. Christina showed up, but her mother, Cheryl, never came. That was the last anyone has seen of her, according to the family and York Police. Up next, the investigation. Detective Bob Papineau says a group of people have information about the disappearance. He hopes they have the heart to come forward and give the family some closure. Cheryl Rowe's sudden absence is unusual, even for a mother who has had her share of personal problems, Christina says. Growing up, Cheryl Rowe was never one to turn down a party, but she didn't let it interfere with motherhood, according to Christina. She definitely had problems, but she was always there for me. She called me a zillion times a day on my cell phone, and we told each other everything. Cheryl Rowe is described as a white female, 5 feet tall, with dark brown hair, brown eyes, and a thin build. Cheryl was last seen wearing dark-colored jeans, a light blue two-toned jacket, purple Adidas running shoes, and a white baseball hat with a green leaf design. Cheryl Rowe was last seen with her family on Rathfun Road, near Yonge Street and Carville Road in Richmond Hill, just after midnight, December 22nd, 2011. She said she was just going to a friend's house, and that was it, said her brother Joe Rowe. On December 25th, 2011, York Regional Police received a missing person call from Christina Clark, Cheryl Rowe's daughter, who said she hadn't heard from her 45-year-old mother in 4 days. Christina called local hospitals and correction centers with negative results before contacting the police. Investigators have taken exhaustive investigative steps, which have included but are not limited to a national missing person search, a complete financial search of Cheryl Rowe's accounts, checks of all correctional institutions, statements taken from family, friends, and associates of Cheryl's. In 2012, police changed Cheryl's investigation status from missing person to murder after uncovering of evidence Cheryl Rowe may have been harmed. It was later determined that Cheryl had gone to an address on Rathfun Road in Richmond Hill. The address was the home of Cheryl's ex-boyfriend, I'll refer to with the initials PC. That was the final location Cheryl was known to be at. Up next, the suspects. This episode is brought to you by Nickel Investigations. Again, there is a biker connection. Cheryl was known to be close with at least one, but in this case, this does not appear to be the individual involved. There is another suspect, that of a convicted rapist that Cheryl was known to hang around with. I'll refer to him as CM. This individual, I believe, cannot be ruled out. In my opinion, and certainly Cheryl Brothers Mitchell's, the prime suspects are the persons who resided at the address of Rathfun Crescent in Richmond Hill. The first person I referred to as PC and his girlfriend, or possibly his ex-girlfriend, are referred to with the initials D. There's a possibility another person who I shall refer to with the initial G may have been involved, either at the residence or at the transportation of Cheryl's body. Was there an altercation at the house? Some reports say that Cheryl was picked up from that location by someone. That person is apparently unknown and is just a rumor currently that Cheryl was picked up at all. But her body seems to have been transported somewhere, so maybe there is some accuracy to this report. Further reports say that Cheryl may have been transported to the Bradford area, about 40 minutes north of Richmond Hill. It is very possible there may have been 3 people involved, PC, D, and the driver of the vehicle. What is known is that PC died in May 2021 and D not soon after. It is believed that the person I referred to as G has also passed away. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ontario Cold Case, the podcast brought to you by Nickel Investigations. And if you have any information, please contact me at the email address I provided in the write-up. Please consider subscribing to our Patreon account and donating to our GoFundMe to help fund further investigations. Our next episode will be available on Sunday, November 5th. Thank you very much for listening.